Hi, everyone. Have you ever noticed that the moment you share a big, exciting plan with someone, the energy seems to just vanish? You were so fired up, so certain, but as soon as the words left your mouth, the momentum died. Back when I was working in the high-pressure world of finance and risk management, I saw this happen constantly. We would have these massive deals on the table, and the people who talked the most, who bragged the loudest before the ink was dry, were almost always the ones who watched the deal fall apart at the last second. I used to think it was just bad luck, but after going through my own burnout and realizing that the hustle and grind was actually pushing my prosperity away, I started investigating the science of reality. What I discovered changed everything. When you speak about a manifestation too early, you aren't just sharing news, you are literally leaking the quantum energy required to make it real. I'm Caroline, and I spent years navigating the corporate system until I learned how to hack it using the laws of consciousness. Today, I live as an independent strategist, managing my own assets and my own time, because I learned that silence is a tool of power, not a lack of action. If you're ready to stop leaking your future and start collapsing the reality you actually want, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm here to share the practical, no-nonsense strategies that took me from stress to sovereignty, and your support helps us grow this community of conscious creators. To help you stay in the right frequency, I've left some essential books in the video description, along with a free guide on equal hours to help you track the signs that your silent work is paying off. Now, let's talk about the physics of why your mouth might be resetting your progress and how to keep your power where it belongs, inside you. The physics of sound versus the physics of intention. When I was deeply immersed in the world of finance and insurance, I operated in an environment where more was always the answer. More meetings, more talking, more pitching, more projecting. We were taught that if you weren't talking about your goals, you weren't working toward them. But as I approached my burnout, I began to notice a strange pattern. The most successful investors I met, the ones who seemed to move through the world with an effortless kind of sovereignty, were often the quietest. They didn't announce their moves, they didn't seek validation for their strategies. They held a silent focus that seemed to bend reality in their favor. To understand why this happens, we have to look at the difference between the physics of sound and the physics of intention. In the quantum world, everything starts as a wave of possibility, as we discussed before. This wave is pure energy. It is a high-frequency, internal state of being. Your intention is like a pressurized steam engine. As long as the steam is contained within the engine, it has the power to move a massive train across a continent. But what happens if you poke 1,000 tiny holes in that engine? The steam escapes, the pressure drops, the train stalls. This is exactly what happens when you talk about your dreams too soon. Speaking is a physical act. It involves vocal cords, air, and sound waves. It is a particle-level activity. When you take a beautiful, high-frequency wave of a future you are building, maybe it's a new career path, a house you're planning to buy, or a shift in your relationship, and you turn it into spoken words, you are essentially venting the pressure. You are releasing the energy that was meant to be used for the physical collapse of that reality into the 3D world, just to get a quick hit of social validation. I remember a specific time in my insurance career. I had this vision for a new way of managing risk that would have essentially given me a massive promotion and much more freedom. It was a brilliant idea, but instead of quietly building the framework and letting the results speak for themselves, I started talking about it at every coffee break. I told my colleagues, I told my friends, I even told my partner at the time. Every time I said the words, "I'm going to change the way this department works," I felt a little rush. I felt like I was already that successful person. But back at my desk, the motivation to actually do the hard internal work of building the project was gone. I had spent the success energy in the conversation. Let's bring this to your daily practice with a common example: relationships. Imagine you've just started dating someone new, or you're working on healing a current relationship. You feel a shift, things are getting better, the wave is becoming more positive. The first instinct for most people is to call a friend and recount every single detail. Oh, he said this, and then I felt that, and I think we are finally on the right track. In that moment, you are taking a delicate, growing quantum field and dragging it out into the harsh light of external observation. You are talking about the seed before it has even sprouted roots. By the time you hang up the phone, the magic often feels a bit diluted. You've turned a sacred internal vibration into a common external topic of gossip. This isn't about being superstitious or fearing evil eyes. This is about energy conservation. In my work today as an independent strategist, I treat my intentions like a private investment portfolio. You don't show the world your unfinished trades. You wait until the position is closed and the profit is in the bank. Why? Because the moment you involve other people's ears, you involve their observers. Think about the people in your life. Even those who love you have their own filters of fear, lack, and limitation. If you tell a friend who is struggling with money about your new wealth strategy, their subconscious camera is going to look at your plan through the lens of, "That's impossible," or "Be careful, you might lose it all." As we learned in the double slit experiment, the observer affects the particle. By talking, you are literally inviting their limited observation to interfere with your unlimited wave. I've seen this happen in my own circle of friends. A close friend of mine was once planning to quit her job to start a boutique agency. She was so talented, but she had a leak. She would post every step on social media. Phase 1 complete, feeling so blessed. Every like she got was a tiny drop of dopamine that convinced her brain the work was already done. When the actual challenges of the business hit, the boring stuff, the legal stuff, the mud we talked about, she didn't have the internal pressure to push through. The steam had all been leaked out through her Instagram stories. In the world of high finance, we call this front running. It's when information gets out before the transaction is complete and it ruins the price. You are front-running your own life. You are giving away the insider information of your soul before the universe has had a chance to deliver the goods. When I moved from the corporate world to a life of sovereignty, one of the hardest but most rewarding changes I made was the 30-day silence rule. When I have a new project or a new desire, I don't speak about it to a single soul for at least 30 days. I let it sit in the pressure cooker of my own consciousness. I breathe life into it, I visualize it, and I act on it quietly. This keeps the energy concentrated. It makes the wave so dense and so powerful that when it finally does collapse into the physical world, it's undeniable. It doesn't need a pitch or an explanation. It just is. So I want you to look at your life today. Where are you leaking? Are you talking about your gym progress instead of actually lifting the weights? Are you telling people about the book you're going to write instead of sitting in the silence of the blank page? Remember, the universe is a silent worker. The stars don't make a sound as they move through the sky, and the grass doesn't announce its growth. Real power is quiet. In the next block, we're going to discuss the biological reset. I'll explain why your brain actually tricks you into failing the moment you share your goals, and how I used this knowledge to stop my own cycle of burnout and start manifesting with true precision. The leak of potential. Why you feel drained. In my former life in the insurance and financial sector, I was surrounded by type A personalities. We were the kings and queens of the announcement. We had meetings to plan meetings, and we celebrated projections long before they became profits. But after my burnout, when I started studying the bridge between neuroscience and quantum physics, I realized why this culture was so exhausting. It's because the human brain has a very specific and somewhat dangerous way of processing information. There's a phenomenon in psychology called social reality. When you tell someone about your goal, let's say you tell a friend, "I'm going to start an investment fund," or "I'm going to lose 20 pounds," and that friend says, "Wow, that's amazing, you're so ambitious." Your brain does something tricky. Because you've received that social validation and praise, your brain releases a hit of dopamine. It's a feel-good chemical that is usually reserved for the completion of a task. Essentially, your brain gets tricked into thinking you've already won. The subconscious mind, which doesn't know the difference between a vivid conversation and physical reality, checks that goal off the list. The hunger, the drive, and the necessary tension required to actually do the work disappear. You feel drained of the motivation because you've already consumed the reward in the form of a conversation. I remember when I was still in the corporate trenches, I had a period where I was constantly talking about leaving the rat race. I would tell my colleagues over lunch about the independent consultancy I wanted to build. I would describe the office, the freedom, the clients. Every time I talked about it, I felt a temporary high. But when I got home at night and actually had the time to work on my business plan, I was exhausted. I had no juice left. I had talked the dream to death. I was mentally full, but my reality was still empty. Have you ever felt this way? Like you spent so much energy talking about what you were going to do that when it came time to actually do it, you were just over it? Leave a comment below and let me know. This leak of potential is a major reason why so many people stay stuck in jobs they hate or relationships that don't serve them. They use the talk about the exit as a safety valve to release the pressure of their current unhappiness. If you're unhappy at work and you spend your weekends complaining to your friends about it and telling them how you're going to quit, you are actually releasing the very tension that would force you to actually quit. You are making your current unacceptable reality just bearable enough to stay stuck in it. In my journey toward becoming an independent strategist, I had to learn to embrace the productive tension of silence. Instead of venting my frustration or my plans, I kept them inside. I let the steam build up. When I didn't tell anyone I was looking for new investment opportunities, the internal pressure drove me to research deeper, to stay up later, and to be more precise. I wasn't getting any praise from the outside, so I had to find my satisfaction in the results. Think about a relationship example. I have a friend who was always on the verge of a breakup. Every time she had a fight with her partner, she would call me and 4 other friends. We would validate her, tell her she deserved better, and cheer her up. By the end of the night, she felt better. But because she felt better, she never actually addressed the root of the problem or made the move to leave. She was using her friends as a dopamine pharmacy to numb the pain of her reality. She was leaking her change energy through her mouth. When I talk about soberanía deliberada, or deliberate sovereignty, this is exactly what I mean. It's the ability to hold your own energy without needing someone else to refill your cup with a compliment. In the financial world, we know that if you show your hand too early, the market will move against you. In the quantum world, if you show your hand to your social circle, your biological market settles for the conversation instead of the conversion. This is why I often say that silence is a wealth strategy. When I was transitioning out of my full-time corporate role, I didn't tell my boss I was planning to leave. I didn't even tell most of my family. I kept that wave of my new life strictly in my internal field. I worked on my assets, I managed my risks, and I built my foundation in the dark. Because there were no leaks, the energy had nowhere to go but into the physical manifestation. By the time I made my move, it was so solid and so backed by energy that it couldn't fail. If you are feeling a lack of motivation lately, ask yourself, am I talking more than I'm building? Are you spending your success before you've earned it? Your potential is like a battery. Every time you open your mouth to brag or seek validation, you're short-circuiting that battery. In the next block, we're going to talk about the observer trap and how other people's energy can actually reset your quantum progress. This is where it gets really interesting, especially if you've ever felt like someone jinxed you. External interference and the observer trap. In the previous block, we talked about how talking drains your internal battery, but there is a second, more invisible reason why silence is your greatest wealth strategy, and it has everything to do with the people around you. In quantum physics, we learned about the observer effect, the scientific proof that the act of watching a particle changes how that particle behaves. I talk a lot about this in my video on the double slit experiment. I'll leave it in the cards and at the end of this video for you to watch, as it is the foundation of everything we are discussing here. When you keep a project or a dream to yourself, you are the only observer of that wave. You are holding a clear, untainted vision of your success. But the moment you tell someone else, even a well-meaning friend, a parent, or a partner, you are inviting their observation into your quantum field. And here is the problem. Most people do not observe through the lens of infinite possibility. They observe through the lens of their own past, their own fears, and their own limitations. I remember when I was still working in insurance, I had an idea for a private investment that felt like a sure thing in my gut. It was a calculated risk, the kind of move that eventually led me to the freedom I have today. I made the mistake of mentioning it to a colleague who was very old school, someone who lived in constant fear of losing his pension. The second I told him, I could see his observation hitting my idea. He didn't say it was bad, but he asked questions like, "Are you sure? Isn't that market volatile? What if you lose everything?" Suddenly, my wave of success felt heavy. His doubt became a particle in my field. I wasn't just fighting my own fears anymore. I was fighting his observation of my reality. In physics, this is called interference. Just like two waves in the ocean can cancel each other out, someone else's low-frequency doubt can cancel the high-frequency momentum of your manifestation. Have you ever felt this way? Like you had a great idea, you felt amazing about it, but as soon as you told someone, you started doubting yourself? Leave a comment below and let me know if you've experienced this energy drain after sharing your plans. This is why, in my journey from a stressed-out employee to an independent strategist, I became very protective of my mental space. I realized that my prosperity wasn't just about how hard I worked, it was about how well I shielded my waves from external interference. Even with my partner or my closest friends, I learned that some things are too tender to be shared before they are solid. Think about a relationship example. Let's say you and your partner are going through a beautiful transformation, learning to communicate better and building a new level of intimacy. If you go and tell a group of friends who are all cynical about love or going through messy divorces, their observation of your relationship will be colored by their pain. They might make a joke about how the honeymoon phase doesn't last or give you advice based on their own betrayals. Without realizing it, you've allowed their dirty lenses to look at your beautiful new reality. You've invited a reset of your progress. In the corporate world, they call this information asymmetry. The person with the most information has the most power. In your spiritual and financial life, the person with the silent intention has the most power. When you are silent, you are a closed circuit. Your energy is circulating within you, building mass, building density, and getting ready to collapse into the physical world. The moment you open that circuit to someone else, you lose control of the voltage. I've had to be very firm with this in my own life. I remember a friend who always wanted to know what I was working on. She would say, "Come on, Caroline, you're always so mysterious lately." I had to realize that her curiosity wasn't for my benefit. It was for her own observation. She wanted to measure my progress against her own. By staying silent, I wasn't being rude. I was being sovereign. I was keeping the double slit of my life focused on the result I wanted, without her fear-based camera interfering with the outcome. The truth is, most people are not rooting for your quantum leap because it highlights their own stagnation. Even if they don't mean to, they will observe the particle of failure because that is what they are used to seeing in their own lives. Protecting your dream in the sacred chamber of silence is the highest form of self-love and the smartest wealth strategy you can adopt. In the final block, I'm going to show you exactly how to create this sacred chamber and how to know when it is finally safe to speak. And it's probably much later than you think. The sacred chamber. Practical strategy. Now that we understand the biological leak of dopamine and the quantum interference of other people's observation, the question is, how do you actually live this in the real world? How do you transition from being a constant announcer to being a sovereign creator? This is where we build what I call the sacred chamber of silence. In my time managing high-stakes risks and assets, I learned that the most critical phase of any deal is the underwriting phase, the time when everything is being analyzed, verified, and strengthened behind closed doors. If a deal is made public before this phase is finished, the market volatility can destroy it. Your life works the exact same way. The sacred chamber is an internal mental space where your desire is allowed to grow without being touched by the particles of the 3D world. To create this, you must adopt a rule that I used during my own transition to freedom, the rule of visual evidence. You do not speak about a manifestation until the physical evidence is so undeniable that your speaking about it doesn't matter anymore. If you are manifesting a new house, you don't tell people when you start looking. You tell them when you have the keys in your hand and you're inviting them for dinner. If you are manifesting a new stream of income, you don't talk about the idea. You talk about it when the first 3 months of profit are sitting in your bank account. Why is this timing so important? Because by the time the manifestation is solid in the physical world, your own belief has already become a hard particle. At that point, someone else's doubt or your own biological dopamine hit can't reset the progress because the progress is already complete. You are no longer protecting a wave of possibility, you are simply reporting a fact. I remember when I was first starting to move into independent investing and consultancy. I had a specific number in my head that I wanted to achieve to feel fully secure in leaving my corporate job for good. For 6 months, I didn't tell a single soul, not even my closest friends who knew I was unhappy. Every time we went out for drinks and they complained about their bosses, I listened, but I didn't say, "Oh, I'm building an exit strategy." I kept that energy inside. I let that steam build up so much that it drove me to work on my spreadsheets at 5 a.m. every Saturday. If I had talked about it, I would have released that pressure, and I probably would have stayed in that office for another 3 years. How do you handle the urge to talk? Because we are social creatures, and the urge to share is real. When you feel that itch to tell someone about your new project, I want you to use a technique I call the intention anchor. Instead of calling a friend, grab a journal or a private digital note and write down the detail you wanted to share. By writing it down, you are collapsing it into a private particle. You are telling the universe, I am so certain of this that I don't need anyone else to validate it. This keeps the circuit closed and the voltage high. Think about a practical example with your health or fitness. We've all seen people who post day 1 at the gym on social media. They get 50 likes, feel great, and then never go back for day 2. They spent the change energy on the post. Contrast that with the person who says nothing for 3 months and then suddenly shows up at a party looking vibrant, fit, and transformed. The second person didn't need the likes to keep going. They used the sacred chamber to build mass. When they finally spoke through their physical appearance, the manifestation was already a solid fact. In my relationships, I started applying this by keeping our private goals and inside jokes strictly between us. I noticed that when my partner and I stopped sharing our big plans for the future with our expanded families too early, the friction in our relationship vanished. We were no longer fighting the observers of our relatives who had their own ideas of what we should do. We became a quantum team, a closed loop of 2 observers focusing on the same wave. The speed at which our life together started to improve was staggering. You have to realize that your life is a high-level experiment. You are Caroline, or whoever you are in your own story, the strategist of your own fate. You wouldn't leave your house with the front door wide open, so why would you leave your consciousness wide open for anyone to walk in and mess with your waves? Start today. Choose one thing, just one, that you've been talking about too much. It could be a business idea, a health goal, or a dream trip. And starting right now, commit to total silence. Don't mention it to your mom, your best friend, or your coworkers. Watch how that inner fire starts to burn hotter. Watch how you suddenly find the energy to take action that you didn't have before. You are building the pressure. You are becoming a sovereign creator. If you want to master these hidden mechanics of reality and move from being a victim of circumstance to a master of your own sovereignty, subscribe to the channel. I'm here to share the strategies that the corporate world taught me, but the quantum world perfected. Your subscription helps us reach more people who are ready to stop talking and start manifesting. If you're ready to take the next step, I've linked some of the most powerful books on the science of silence and manifestation in the description below. Also, don't forget to download the free material on equal hours. It's the perfect companion for when you're working in silence and need to recognize the quantum nods the universe is giving you. Everything you need to support your journey is right there in the description. I want to thank you so much for staying until the end, for watching, and for being part of this shift in consciousness with me today. It's an honor to have you here, and I truly value the time you've spent in this silent chamber of learning with me. Thank you for being here, for trusting the process, and for choosing to take control of your own energy. I'll see you in the next video.